And well, hey Matt, how you doing? And welcome to the Industry 4 Community Podcast, Problem Solvers, the very first in the trenches, with Matt Parris from GE Hire, the appliance division. I'm your host with the most, Walker Reynolds. All right, today we have this is the first time we're ever doing this on the podcast. Okay, it's not really a podcast; it's more of a webinar. The reason we call it Problem Solvers. Podcast is meant to only be listened to. We do the video so that if you want to watch the video, you can on YouTube or LinkedIn or X or whatever. But when we're shooting a podcast, you can trust that you can just listen to the audio and you'll get everything. A workshop or a webinar, you're actually sharing your screen and you're going through stuff. We call our webinars or workshop, problem solvers. And today is the first in the trenches. This is the first time that we have a enterprise end user teaching a lesson on technology. And today what we're going to be doing is going over Portainer's new industrial app portal. Matt Parris is a long-standing member of the community. Matt and I have a lot of conversations behind the scenes. Matt is incredibly active on discussions about OPC UA and MQTT. And in this case, he worked very, very closely with Portainer to develop the industrial app portal. In fact, he'll talk about where it comes from here in a couple of minutes. We're super excited. This is going to be pretty technical. Okay, we're going to have these are certainly advanced topics we're going to be covering. And I'll say this: the people who are going to get the most out of this is for everyone. Okay, at some point, if you're doing Industry 4, Industry 5, you're doing distributed containerized architectures. The way you do that in Portainer now is you start standalone. Portainer's managing your Docker instance or whatever, Kubernetes or Podman, or it's managing your container management infrastructure standalone. And then you're like, I need to manage a lot of devices, and so I enable the edge capabilities. And then I start managing hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of devices, and then I start running into limitations of edge. The industrial app portal is designed to close those limitations. So we're going to be talking here about the people who are already using Portainer Edge are absolutely going to get the most out of this. This is going to apply to everyone. But if you're already using Portainer Edge, you're going to get the most out of this for sure. If you're getting ready to use it, you definitely want to watch this, because at some point you are going to hit a critical mass where something like Portainer's industrial app portal is going to be required. Okay. And Matt's going to go over where it came from, what were the limitations that GE Hire was dealing with, and why he recommended these feature sets here in a minute. But before that, I want to go over a couple of announcements. I also want to give thanks to our sponsor, HiveMQ. HiveMQ is our sponsor this month. I want to just say something real quick. We're going to be publishing a couple of videos from my speeches with HiveMQ last week. We went to their Connect in Miami. I gave the keynote address, and then I met with their business development team on day 2 and did like a Q&A, I think, with the BD team. I had a chance to, HiveMQ is fundamentally shifting their business focus. They have all new pricing, all the stuff you guys have been complaining about. I got to sit through that presentation up until they got to the confidential stuff and they had to leave. I got to see what the new pricing model looks like, go to market, what the future, they're going from data platform to information platform to AI enablement platform. I got to see the whole future of HiveMQ, and I'm super, super excited about where they're going. I couldn't possibly be more excited. So huge thank you to HiveMQ for sponsoring the community this month. All right, real quick. Matt's title is Director of Quality Test Systems for Industry 4. I call him the spokesperson for GE Hire in the community and for the end user. I think Matt is as fluent or more fluent than basically any end user I work with, if I'm being honest with you. All right, quick announcements. Prove It 2026, February 16th to the 20th at Hyatt Regency Reunion Tower in Dallas. The week is going to be phenomenal, just redonkulous. Portainer is a major sponsor and plays a major role in the infrastructure. Actually, I want to point this out. It's kind of funny. HiveMQ and Portainer. The Prove It conference is not possible without both of them. And when I mean is not possible, I'm saying if Portainer as a product doesn't exist and HiveMQ as a product doesn't exist, the feature sets that they offer, there's no way we could do Prove It. It just, the amount of money it would cost for us to do development, management, we would never even get that many vendors connected together, first off. They're two of the most important vendors apart to the infrastructure, and then Ignition obviously is the third most important. We have some of the nights, the rooms are running out. Okay, so if you're going to book the hotel at Hyatt Regency, you definitely want to get your room booked, because some of the nights early in the week and late in the week, we're running out of rooms. All vendor slots are filled. A couple of things, community announcements. I've talked about this before, but new for 2026, we are redoing Mastermind from scratch. So all of the core 8 lessons that I did in 2020, I am redoing those lessons in the context of the post-AI world. Okay, and we had the first one this month, but if you are in Mastermind, you will notice that we are revisiting many of the lessons we did in 2020, but we are doing them in the context of agentic AI. So the cores are foundation, unified namespace, data ops, MES, ERP, leveraging cloud, disruptive leadership, and then there will be a final lesson in agentic AI before we keep going with Mastermind. Mentorship is also getting an overhaul. Okay, so beginning in March, Brian Pryby is going to be the product owner of Mentorship, and we're going to focus on new skill development for engineers. Okay, and we'll have a lot more details to come right after the Prove It conference. We don't want to distract the community. And then lastly, those of you who have sent out messages to the contact email at iiot.university, yes, the 25% off code is still good. Okay, we decided to keep it active until January 21st, so until tomorrow. That 25% code, which is new year, all one word, is still active for those of you who have sent out messages in the contact email. And with that, let's pivot into, look at that, look at me. I'm 2 minutes ahead of schedule. Let's pivot into the industrial app portal from Portainer. All right, Matt, real quick, do you want to give us some background on where this came from? Let's start there, because I know you've been working with Neil and the group for a while on, and this product basically comes from the conversations with you.
Yeah, I guess we should start with containers in general. I think I first got exposed to them, I guess the idea of Docker in 2015, 2016, around that time.
Really, right?
I don't know what it was for you, but
it was 18 for me. 18 is where I really started kicking the tires.
Well, where I became familiar with it when I started using it, it was 2 different times. So familiar with it and knowing that I wanted to go that direction was much earlier. So at the time, I saw it as a great way to standardize your app deployment, because it could standardize a lot of, and we'll get into this. At the time, there was Resin OS. I don't know if you came across them.
Yep.
And then they rebranded into Balena. At the time, they didn't have they were really targeted to IoT devices. And so they were really cloud first and cloud only, if you really look at it, type of deployment strategy. So it required connectivity to the internet and managing through their cloud portal. And their on-premises solution seemed a lot of effort to get it stood up to be equivalent to their out-of-the-box cloud capability.
And real quick, Matt, hold on. If you're watching the live stream, do me a favor. If you're watching a live stream and you are either an end user in manufacturing and industry, or you are a consultant like an integrator, comment in the chat, in the live chat, whether or not you are using containerized environments as part of your production infrastructure. So what I really want to discern is from the audience, what percentage are using containerized environments in production? I trust nearly everyone is at least using containerized environments in development, but how many are using containerized environments in production? Just say me in production or whatever. Go ahead. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, Vaughn, if you could put up the screen that we've got. So this is really the challenge of software development and software deployment is you have a lot of variables that you're trying to control for when you deploy the software. So you've got the application software at the top.
Mm-hmm. So that's the thing. That's the thing the human being is interacting
that you
with.
actually care about.
Yep.
But then to get that to run, you need a lot. You need a runtime environment. It's got external dependencies and libraries it's got to connect to, and then you got a bunch of variables as well of the operating system. But then you also have the operating system itself. So the idea with Docker is it can package all of those things and keep it consistent across the deployments. So I put a couple of dates in there because I had to go back and look up based on when I started learning about Docker, how does that compare to when it actually started coming out? So I don't know, I put Docker Hub when it starts, probably that's the beginning of it. I would assume.
That's certainly when the community started.
Yeah, but then it takes a little bit of time to trickle through within manufacturing specifically to trickle down to that. It just looks like it took it 3 years for me to start to hear about it.
Yeah, and I think, and if you think about it, the delay was people didn't understand what a container would give them.
Right.
I mean, lightweight deployment, easily managed, skip over the operating system, go straight to the kernel and get more out of your resources and manage it faster. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what that's what Docker got you. But it wasn't until 2018 or whatever that people started using the analogy that a container is like a VM, except you're skipping over the operating system. It's like, I think people really struggled to understand what it was.
And for me, it was in the 2019, 2021 timeframe. That's when I talked to vendors. I was like, okay, you got this great software. Is it in a container, a Docker container, Docker image? Some of them were like, well, we've heard that request before. We're working on it. Some are, what is Docker? And others are like, yeah, we've got it. So it almost became a sorting function when you're talking to the vendors of asking them, are you available as a Docker container? Because it lets you know like where their head was at in terms of where the market was going. But as you start to use Docker images, it doesn't standardize everything. You still have to, you got the image itself, but that's got to be within the context of a whole compose file. So for those not aware of what a compose file is, it's basically a way for you to specify the environment that the Docker image is going to run within. So there's a lot of options that you can use when you're creating a compose file in terms of when you click deploy, what it's actually going to go do. And not only the compose file, but you can have configuration files, and there's infinite number of possibilities on how that's going to be set up. And then you also have environmental variables. Those are simpler, config items that you can control. So we're kind of going from let's package together the application so we don't have to worry about that. But now we're starting to view of, well, let's package together all of it. So now I can think of it in terms of a single application.
Hey, Vaughn, Doug Miller's question that he's got right here. Be prepared to bring that up here in maybe 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. Make sure you save that one. Doug Miller's question. We'll want to come back to.
So to try to wrangle around this Portainer, we've leveraged Portainer to solve this problem of deploying Docker containers across a fleet of devices.
Yeah, I just want to point something out. Every time I spin up a device, okay, people ask me my stack all the time. Hey, what's your stack, right? And one of the things, the question came back up on. One of the things is literally when I deploy a new device, I have a bash script that runs that I pull from a repository and I run that bash script, and that bash script installs Docker, installs Portainer. There is no Linux environment I spin up that does not have Docker and Portainer running on it. None. It's literally the first step. And Portainer has become such a huge part of how I manage infrastructure. You know, and I think Matt and I were talking about this earlier, and I think it's an important point, which is, what is Portainer? Well, the answer is it depends on where you are in your infrastructure journey. If you're just learning Docker, it's the UI for managing Docker, or it's the UI for managing Kubernetes or Podman, but that barely scratches the surface. That's just the entry point. What Portainer actually is a very powerful infrastructure management utility. Like on a scale we can't even wrap our brains around. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, that first stage is I need a GUI to make all the levers that I can pull easy,
right?
To pull without me having to remember all the command line interface commands that you got to send. So that's kind of our first entry into it as well. Portainer is able to support either Docker standalone or Docker Swarm. And then later in 2020 and 2024, they added Kubernetes support and Podman support.
I would love to see this distribution. I wonder if Neil is collecting this info, but I'll bet it's 90% Docker standalone, and then it's Swarm, Kubernetes, and Podman takes up the other 10%. Even though a few years from now it'll be completely flipped on its ear. It'll be Docker Swarm and Kubernetes will be 90% of what Portainer is used to manage.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see. So then later in 2018, Portainer released a piece of software that they called the Portainer Agent. And this was really released to help them manage Swarm environments. So when you're talking about Docker Swarm, you have multiple computers that are separate bare metal instances, or if you're in a data center, you could have different virtual machines serving as nodes of the Swarm. But you use the Docker engine to connect them together and form a swarm. And you have a master of the swarm, and then you have workers. But it's this idea that the agent can run and connect to each of those instances of the engine. And then Portainer can then connect to those to then manage the network resources and the volumes and all the things that go into that. What was not, when this was released, and I didn't realize it at the time, but this Portainer agent, there was no technical limitation to having to use it with Swarm, is that you're able to connect to a standalone Docker. But at the time, their documentation didn't indicate that.
Right.
And so I remember standing up a server where I wanted the ability to access or browse the files within the volume. I don't know if you've done that within Portainer, but you're able to drill into an environment and actually go into a volume, see the files that are within the volume and download them.
It's not very intuitive.
No.
It's not very intuitive to figure out how to do it. But again, it's an advanced. And real quick, for those of you who are kind of new to containerization, the best way to think about the difference between Docker and Docker Swarm. Okay, this is not, by the way, a year from now, you'll be like, okay, it was a simplistic explanation. Think of Swarm as horizontal and vertical scale for Docker instances, and then standalone is one node. Think of it that way. The best way to think of Swarm is a way of horizontally and vertically scaling Docker environments using a single point of entry, whereas Docker standalone is one node, one single point of entry. Swarm is many nodes, one point of entry. That's the best way to think of it in your head.
Yeah, if you got like a bunch of Raspberry Pis, let's say you could create a swarm, and then let's say you got an application, you're just going to throw it at the swarm, and you don't care which specific Raspberry Pi is going to run it. You just know that one of them is going to, and it'll take care of it from there. So then they come out in 2019 with this idea of the Edge agent. And this was really released to solve a different problem of connectivity. So if I go back to the idea of the Portainer server connecting to the agent, you'll notice I drew the arrow, and it's the server connecting to the agent. So if you have a computer running the agent somewhere and the Portainer server is trying to manage it, it needs to have a network path from the server to that PC that's running. And that works when you're in a Swarm environment most of the time, because a lot of times your swarm environment is going to be in the same either layer 2 or the same, let's say, security zone where it has routable access to each other. But I'm sure that as they started deploying Portainer servers out in the wild, they realized not all computers are reachable. For example, if your server, let's say, is hosted in the cloud, you're not going to have a direct path from that cloud instance down into your wherever your PC is that you're trying to manage. So the idea with Edge is that they took the same binary, but they just had a flag that you could specify when you deploy the agent to say, I want this to actually connect up and out. So that's really what Portainer Edge agent is. It's the same agent software. It's a lightweight worker that's running on your computer to help manage your Docker. But the advantage is that it's calling up and out. So you get it allows you, if you're deep within your enterprise, let's say, you're able to call out to your, let's say, internet hosted Portainer server, and you're able to make that happen. So it basically calls out with an SSL tunnel, and it allows the Portainer server to come back through that tunnel to do the management. But for those of us that have been doing this, these types of infrastructure deployments, you'll notice this pattern is actually useful in other ways, which we'll get into also, of when you're going to deploy a lot of something, like let's say hundreds of PCs, it's much easier for those PCs to know about a single well-known server. So let's say your Portainer server has an address of like server.enterprise.com. You're able to program that at scale within all your computers, and they know how to call home. To go the other way, for you to remember all the different host names of your computers or all the different static IP addresses of it, it doesn't scale to be able to deploy agents at that number. So Edge agents enable network connectivity, but they also enable scalability in terms of the deployment. And it's the same concept with Sparkplug, with MQTT, how you can have a single MQTT broker. They all know how to call into it, and that you don't have to do the opposite. So just to review some Portainer deployments. So on the left, we've got standalone, which are just individual computes, either servers or desktop PCs, and they're running Portainer server on it. And all they're doing is managing the local resources within that. But you can also install the agent, and that gives you some additional features like being able to manage the host or view the host resources. So standalone is one option. The other option is central management. So again, their standard one is a Portainer server connecting to the Portainer agents, which we discussed. That can be difficult at times.
And one of the things that's really important to note if you're new to Portainer, there's one install of Portainer. So whether it's server or agent or edge agent, all of that is coming from the same install package. Okay, so it's more, I'm selecting the server functionality for this instance. I'm selecting the Portainer agent for that instance. I'm selecting the edge agent for that instance, but it's the same software. Actually, I actually think under the hood, they're containerizing all these functions, but I actually have never asked Neil that.
Yeah, like Portainer server is a Docker image itself. So it's
right.
Kind of funny that to use Portainer server to manage your Docker engine, you need Docker to install Portainer to then manage itself.
Yeah, your first step is always a command line installation of Portainer,
right?
So that you can use Portainer to manage your infrastructure using a GUI. It's kind of ironic, actually.
Yeah. So some of the early versions of Portainer, you would list out your containers, and one of the items in that list would be the Portainer server container.
All right. So real quick, do you want to quickly explain why this is important, right? So, first off, infrastructure wise, so at GE Hire, how many nodes are you responsible for? So ballpark. No, I mean, you probably know the total number. I saw you have a knowledge graph on your desk wall, on your wall. So you probably know a ballpark number, but what are the total number of nodes you have to oversee?
Well, regarding Docker, That's a limited list of, let's say, 50, but that's going to grow to maybe 1,000 within the next couple of years. As we roll out some other projects that we're doing regarding cybersecurity and data acquisition and whatnot. So we're already I'm already seeing where this is going to go and why we need to have a more scalable solution.
Why is Docker and Portainer important to GE appliances?
Well, it allows a standard deployment. So, for example, if we have a fleet of, let's say, computers that are within our control cabinets on the plant floor, and we have a software that enables remote access for external vendors to be able to service that, or even as we get better about cybersecurity, it's for us as employees that when we're on the IT side of the house within our offices.
Vaughn, switch back to the cameras when we're just answering a question. Please.
But when you're on the IT side of the house, you don't necessarily want to allow anyone access to your factories. So, but you need an infrastructure in place to allow your employees to log in to a portal to then grant them access to certain pieces of equipment. So one way that we're looking at doing that is using an application that's deployed out via Docker. So for us to be able to deploy it, first off, in a very repeatable way, and then to manage updates and connectivity at scale, it's the same type of application. So we're not really concerned too much about variability of that application across the deployments. Docker is a great vehicle to allow you to just click the button and let it fly out.
Yeah, here's a good example for those of you who are wondering from just a practical perspective, like why I use Docker and Portainer. The total number of devices across all my clients that I have to manage is in the 80,000 range. So that's the total number of individual nodes that are running Linux. I'm going to, in this, Linux or Mac OS. Okay, they're running, it's either Mac OS or Linux. It's 80,000. Okay, I have a common stack, for example, that I install on every one of those devices that I'm managing. Okay, I have a Docker Compose file and I have a stack. Some of the things that I have running on there, I have glances running on there. So glances is so that I can look at, if I'm debugging a device, I can hit the glances endpoint and I can look at resources. Okay, I have a stack of 5 or 6 pieces of software that I put on all 80,000 of those devices. Now, if I don't use a tool like Portainer Edge agent, okay, then I have to have inbound access to all 80,000 of those devices. Number one, if I use Edge agent, they're going to talk out to me. They just have to have access to the server, to the Portainer server. That's number one. Number two, if I don't have that tool, then I would have to be able to SSH into each one of those individual devices. Okay, I would have to SSH in, and I would have to I'd have to write some type of bash script that essentially went to a list of 80,000 devices and then went to device one, SSH'd in, and made a change to my stack. Say I wanted to add a piece of software to my stack that's got 5 containers. I want to add a 6th container. And I've got 80,000 devices I've got to manage. Well, that means I have to write some type of automation that's going to go through, remote into each one of those, look up the credentials, make sure we're using the same key, right? Portainer gives me the ability to update my stack and then essentially assign that stack to a group based on tags using the Edge capability. So if it's in this, if it has the tag industry 4 service, for example, I can say this stack is assigned to everything that's got this tag. And if I update the stack, add a 6th piece of software, Portainer handles the management of updating all 80,000 of those devices with the 6th container automatically. I don't have to do any of it. I mean, that's a reason that you're using Portainer and you're using Edge Agent to manage that infrastructure. Part of what Matt's going to get to here in a second is, okay, what were the limitations of doing it that way? And why is it we now have the app portal? I just want to make sure we level set that for those of you who are not currently managing infrastructure at this level, whether it's on the OT or the IT side. All right, Vaughn, I think we can go back to the screen share.
So the other deployment is edge flavored, and this is what we're going to focus on for this session. They have two flavors. I've not used the asynchronous flavor, but that is really intended for like bandwidth constrained deployments where the edge agent will check in every so often. Then the Portainer server will save a snapshot of that. And so you're actually managing the snapshot. And then the edge agent, when it checks in again, it's able to do the changes that you need. We've just used the standard one because we're not bandwidth constrained. And that allows you to directly, in real time, manage the different edge agents. So if you got a multi-central management, that's another type of deployment. And you may have variables like location or responsible organization where you want to split out where your Portainer servers are. Like for a given enterprise, you may not have one Portainer server for your entire business. You may split them out by one per plant, or you may even split them out by these two organizations are going to have their own, just as a way of keeping people from stepping on each other's toes. So when you get to a multi-Portainer server deployment, that's where it also gets challenging, because every change you make in one server, you also got to replicate them to every other server, let alone every change you make in an edge agent. So it just starts to get exponential in terms of management. So when you're talking central orchestration, this is kind of the standard way without edge deployment. This is where you got a stack in your server that's basically a compose file. So you create the stack, and then you're able to take that stack and then deploy it to whichever edge agent you want. So that's a very manual way to do it. You can kind of help accelerate it by having.
And it's where everybody starts, and it's where everyone starts.
Yeah. So you do this, and you're like, oh, this is cool. I can copy from my my notepad my latest compose file and paste it into the stack editor, and then I can paste it in and click deploy, and it's up. And you're like, oh, that's a really good time saver. Then you start doing it times 10. You're like, well, wait a minute. I'm tired of copying and pasting 10 times. So there's got to be a better way. So there is. They call it it's the way they do their edge orchestration. So when you're using an edge agent, Portainer server has these capabilities of edge stack, edge configuration, and edge group. So the idea is you can have a single edge stack, and let's say that's a globally defined way of your application, and you can use it many places. You're able to deploy that, like you said earlier, you can deploy that to an edge group. And you can start with your edge group being empty, but then as you add edge agents into your group, when they join that group, they will receive that edge stack, which is a pretty neat capability. So you can start by saying, here's how I want my infrastructure to look. You create your edge stacks, your edge groups, and then apply your configurations to those.
Until you forgot, and then until you forgot which stacks you assigned to which group. Right. And then you add an agent to that group, and all of a sudden that stack is running on it, and you didn't want that. You're like, whoa. Tracking that is very problematic.
That's right. So we're going to get into some of the problems or the challenges. The way I like to think of this is within the container ecosystem, there's really three main roles that come to my mind. First off, there's the application developer. So that's very analogous to an OEM, or when we talk about OEM, end user system integrator. So an application developer, the OEM, they basically create the application package. So that's pretty common, and I think we all understand that. Then there's the application user. So this is the role where they're interested in the application. They're aware that the application exists out there. Maybe it's on Docker Hub, and they want to actually deploy it to their edge device so that they can start to use it. But what's missed and what's starting to become more apparent when you're dealing at scale is this idea of a platform administrator. And this is someone who will bridge the gap between the application developer and the application user by provisioning application recipes. So this is a very new concept, I think, for, let's say, the market as a whole within manufacturing, is that you want to take a very vanilla, we're trying to skip over the benefits that Docker is. It does a lot, is like we said earlier, it packages together in a very repeatable way in application, but it leaves open so many things. And so the platform administrator is there to try to standardize even the application deployment itself. And so I call that an application recipe. So if we look at the perspective from the application user, again, this is the person that wants to deploy it to an edge device to begin using it. We talked about edge groups. So you can create an edge group for an application, and you can add the agent to it, and that will then deploy it. Another workflow is, let's say you want to upgrade that application. So let's say you deployed Node-RED version 1 and version 2 comes out, and you want to upgrade those at scale. So you would create a version 2 edge group, and that would be empty, and you would associate your version 2 stack of Node-RED to it. And then when you're ready to upgrade that agent, you would remove it from version 1 edge group, and you'd add it to version 2 edge group. So that's an upgrade capability. But as you start dealing with that with scale, it gets complicated very quick, where you basically, edge groups are a 4-dimensional problem. And so the 4 dimensions are, dimension 1 is the application itself. So is it Node-RED or Mosquito or whatever other application you have? So that's one axis. The second axis is the variants within those applications. So within an application, you might have your production variant. So this is where you have configurations that are meant to connect to your production infrastructure, let's say, or maybe your security is tightened, and so you're not allowing HTTP, only HTTPS, for example. So you have variants between within an application. But then you also have locations. So you may want to control, this location has this kind of configuration, or maybe these variables that are set. And this other location, maybe that first location is very low level in your, level 1, level 2 in your Purdue model. But maybe you've got another.
I just shot a video about this.
Okay.
Like right before this podcast, I shot a video about this very topic. Not Portainer, but the one of the things that you have to consider with technology. The question was, what are the things I need to think about before buying new technology? And one of the things I talked about is architecturally, where does an ingress and egress live? Does it live in L1, L2, L3, L4? And where do all the ingress egresses live? Because those considerations play a huge role in your application architecture.
Yeah. And let alone bringing security into that mix.
Right.
A whole other level. So yeah, location, you may have like a level 3, level 4 location style variant or configuration. And then the fourth dimension is the version. So within the application, version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4. So being able to manage all 4 of those, it becomes unwieldy. So if you're an application user and you have multiple servers and you have multiple edge groups with multiple agents, it's unwieldy. So this is my quote. I'm going to propose that vendors that package available IT technology into intuitive OT workflows will win the market.
Amen. I'm going to put that on my wall.
So as we were going through and dealing with this with Portainer, I started talking to Neil Cresswell of CEO of Portainer. Very accessible, very, very interested in solving people's problems. And so I just presented, here's 3 scenarios that I have a problem being able to manage within Portainer. Scenario 1 is I have a Docker image, and let's say it's just one image, and I have a single compose file, and let's say that compose file can work everywhere. But I have 2 different location configs. Like location A needs to insert these variables in this way, and location B needs it in this way. Let's say I'm running a broker, and I need to bridge it up to a server that's another broker. And in location A, the server address is location A server, and in location B, it's location B server. Well, I don't want to have to hard code that stuff in the compose and have 2 different composes. I'd rather just have a variable in the compose, and then I can fill that variable out when I go to deploy it. So that's one scenario. Scenario 2 is, again, I have the same compose file, different configs, but let's say in location A, I want to run version 1 of the application. In location B, I want to run version 2. This could be, for example, you're trying to upgrade your infrastructure and you need to test it out in one location first before you roll it across your entire fleet. So you're going to have one location, you're going to target the version update, but you don't want to mess with the other ones. So that's scenario 2. Scenario 3 is I have the same version. I have 2 different location configs, but I have 2 different compose versions. So I maybe in location A, I'm trying to use the application in one way, and in location B, it's a totally different way. So how do I manage that? So when you review all these things, I started discussing with Portainer, what would it look like if we reimagined the Portainer user experience? And one of the top ideas that came to mind was we really just need 2 perspectives within the application. One is an application-centric view, meaning if I come to the web page of trying to manage my entire fleet, what applications do I have installed?
Right.
You know, what flavors?
This is very much an OT perspective right here. This is very much an OT perspective.
Well, and it goes back to the quote. So if you watch Portainer and their journey, you could tell they started in IT.
Yep.
And they've evolved to OT by solving these problems. So yeah, application centric. But then I also, at the same time, want a device centric view. So those are 2 different views looking at the same database, let's say, of what's in deployment, but they're 2 different ways of coming at the problem. Application centric. Which nodes are running my Node-RED application? And which nodes have version 1 and which nodes have version 2? That's a very simple question to ask, but in Portainer Server, that's very hard to answer. Device-centric, it's where are all my devices and how are they related and what groups are they in and how am I managing it? And in both the application and device-centric view, having a hierarchical view is important, or allowing to filter based on the hierarchy. So I want to be able to put my devices within a hierarchy so that I can drill down or filter, just have some level of context about what's what. This other idea of deploying an application in 3 clicks, I felt strongly that the technology would allow me as an end user or as an application user to be able to select the application, select my variants, and then click deploy. It didn't seem with the technology there was any limitation with being able to do that. It was just a user experience challenge. Also, being able to have this idea of an industrial app store. So me as an end user, what applications may I install? What's available to me? And then being able to extend that either with my own custom applications or, which is also important, being able to curate it. So if I'm an enterprise, let's say platform administrator, and I don't want to allow anyone to install any Docker image, but I want to give them access to install the images and the applications that are going to be safe for them or reliable. Maybe you want to hold them to a stable version of the application and not give them latest unstable or nightly build. Being able to create that industrial app store even internally would be useful. And then also role-based access control based on the hierarchy. So that also is important. If you have 2 different functions in your enterprise and they both want access to the same devices or different devices, but they're having to go through the same Portainer server, you want a way to be able to clearly allow who can access what. And then when you have multiple Portainer servers, being able to have a single point of entry to be able to access any of those. So just like your edge agents connecting to your Portainer server, you have a single point of entry through the Portainer server to access and administer those edge agents. If you take it up a level, you're going to have the same problem with your Portainer servers. So you want a single point of entry to manage your servers. And then also it's important to just have a single overview page that clearly articulates any error statuses of applications and devices, which is also a challenge in Portainer server. So this is where the industrial app portal concept came to be. I remember starting the discussions of a better user experience back in 2024, I guess. And then even at Prove It last year, going to the Portainer booth and reiterating how can we get a better user experience when we're trying to deploy applications. And so they started in May to actually put teeth behind this and begin development for it. And so I wanted to, I guess, quickly review this diagram, and then we can get a little bit into the showing what they came up with. But the idea is the app portal is going to sit above, outside of any Portainer server. So it's its own application. And the idea is that the Portainer server will connect up and out to the app portal. So just like the edge agents connect up and out to the Portainer server, the server will connect up and out to the app portal. Then you have the idea of an app catalog. So you've outlined, here are the applications that I want to deploy, and you've outlined what makes up that application. Like, what are the config files that should be part of it, all the compose files. Here's the different variants, and here's the versions that we support of those. And so it allows you to select those once you've defined all those in the back end. And then the other big feature is it creates a hierarchy that you can create, and then you can put your devices within that hierarchy. So I wanted to real quickly show. I want to give kudos to Portainer, because what I'm showing here is what looks like an application, but all it is a complete GUI mockup. And so as we tried to work through some of these workflows, Anthony at Portainer was leading the development of this. He would provide me a link to this, and I would be able to go in and start to use some of the interface and say, oh, this is what's working and this is not what's working. It allowed them to rapidly prototype amazingly quick in terms of getting the user experience pretty well.
Right, and the goal here is to be able to quickly find, sort by application, sort by device, organize by device, organize by application, and manage. At the end of the day, this is really, if you think about it, it's unified namespace for, it's not unified namespace. It's illustrative purposes though. It is similar to, it's unified namespace for managing infrastructure, right? That's, at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to achieve. How do I manage all of the nodes and the things running on the nodes? And how do I update and maintain my infrastructure, application infrastructure? And the bigger you get, the larger the implementation. You know, we shot a video. Why are proof of concepts? Why is it so hard to go from proof of concept to scale? This is just one reason, right? This is closing just one of the gaps. It's very easy for you to manage the domain you control that's got 5 servers and 20 applications. It is much more difficult to take that and scale it across your entire plant. It is infinitely more difficult to scale it across all your plants and then organize it by region and then offload it when one of your plants gets purchased. And it's infinitely more difficult. And the industrial edge the app portal is designed to make that a much more seamless process.
Yeah, if you're just in the position of you're in control of your own domain, your own resources, and your own applications, you're not going to be interested so much in this. It's when you have to take what you've done and hand it off to someone else, and that someone else has got to manage it. That's when all these questions will start to to open up. How do we make this happen? So, for example, in this GUI mockup, he had this idea of the hierarchy. So we've got like the corporation at the top, and you got different plants and different areas within it. And you can see that when I'm on the devices, I have access to this hierarchy. But when I go to the installed apps, I lose that. And so that was one of the feedback that I gave him of what would it look like if the hierarchy was a global construct, and no matter what view I'm in, applications or device, I could look at it by hierarchy. So that was, iteration number 2, where they moved the hierarchy to the left here. And then whether I'm in the overview or devices or the installed apps, I'm able to drill in based on a device view or an application view. But he was able to prototype over the course of a couple months just on the GUI and making sure that things were making sense. And then and finally in November, they got ready for the SPS show to have a proof of concept of their software. And so that's what they've got now. I haven't heard a release date for it, but I was just going to show a little bit about kind of the differences between Portainer and the app portal. And so I'm going to just go ahead and spin up a virtual machine here. And we can, while it's spinning up, we can talk about some of these concepts. So I've got this virtual machine where I've specified a cloud init file where it's basically like infrastructure as code in a way. If you've heard of Terraform or whatnot, cloud init is very similar to that. But the idea is that I can specify ahead of time how I want this virtual machine to look like. At which, like you said, you'll see I install Portainer and then install the Edge agent right after that. So it's pretty quickly, it's up, and we're just going to watch some of the rest of it. So I'm going to sudo in and tail the log of the cloud init. We're just going to watch it complete. So I was a little late to it, but it took about 40 seconds to spin up. And you can see where on the screen where it was pulling the image for the Edge agent, and then it spun that up. But if you look on the right-hand side of my screen, you'll see it's got this waiting room capability. And you can see this one just popped up a few seconds ago. And so this is another really neat feature of a Portainer server where that Edge capability comes into play, where I can set that script ahead of time and deploy that at scale, and they're all going to check in to the single Portainer server. And then as I go through, I can then, as they check in, I can adopt them. And then they're in. So now I have access to this management or this Edge agent to manage it. Have you used the waiting room or the
yes,
that check-in process?
In fact, I love it. Here's the only thing I don't like about it. Forgetting that I'm using the waiting room. And so I'm like,
why are things not showing up?
Why are things not showing up? Oh yeah, I forgot a step. I need to go.
Yeah.
I need to go to the waiting room and provision.
So the idea is that every Edge agent that shows up here in the server, it now appears as a device in the industrial app portal. So you can see some of these other devices that I've pulled offline, but I've got this device that is online, Portainer Edge Demo 1300. So it's there and it's available for me to use.
Hey, Vaughn, real quick, this is a good spot to bring in Doug Miller's question. The big challenge I see to edge compute. Yep. Go ahead and take it, Matt. A big challenge I see to edge compute isn't the containers or the orchestration of said containers, although it is a challenge. It's not the biggest. There are definitely challenges there. The bigger challenge is in the management and maintenance of the bare metals host operating system. Curious what you're seeing in that space. So what we've done is we've addressed the first piece, right, of edge compute is containers and orchestration, right? Now it's not just containers and orchestration, which is the application focus, but also the device management and organization. But the bigger challenge for many people is the management and maintenance of the bare metals host OS. Now I use jobs. In Portainer, I use jobs to do this, but curious what you're seeing in that space. Because obviously this would be a big thing to GE appliances. I mean, to any multinational enterprise.
I'm not happy with the way the market is today, and I feel like there needs to be some improvement here. So do you remember IO Hub OS?
Yes.
You got to go way back in your memory of like 2019. But they had this device, the IO Hub, and it was meant to be, this was from EasyVPN. So EasyVPN had a device that enabled, remote access.
By the way, loved their technology. I absolutely loved it. But they were too far ahead of the market, and it killed them. Yeah.
Yeah. So they had this idea that they wanted to sideload their devices with Docker capability. And they had this idea that I was an immutable OS, and it was just there to allow you to deploy containers.
Correct.
It's like, perfect. And then it's like, well, what devices do you support? It's like, well, it's proprietary. It only supports the device. But then they open sourced it in terms of the IO Hub OS, and it's on GitHub. And I was like, well, this is exciting. Like, I don't know if it supported ARM, but I know it like x64. You could bring your own, whatever device you want. And then you've got this immutable OS where you could define its behavior in like as a JSON file. You just slip that in and it's going to boot up like you said it would. And then you have an upgrade path where it'll flip to partition B to do the upgrade. If it fails, it'll flip back to partition A. I was like, this is really slick because the question I have is, what's the minimum from bare metal to get you to a Docker engine?
Because at the end of the day, think about what the operating system is. I mean, at the end, what was the operating system for? The operating system was the environment in which you managed applications.
Right.
Right. That at the end of the day, that's what it is. I mean, for me, and this is the reason, and again, I would say the market's getting closer to the market starting to understand the operating system is a lot less important than it used to be. And at some point, the operating system is going to be obsolete. The operating system as we understand it
of the bare metal
will become on the bare metal. Right. Will become obsolete.
People may know this, or may not know this, but you can run Ubuntu, full Ubuntu in a Docker container.
In a container, yeah.
So yeah, what is the minimum of the bare metal? Because the smaller you get that, then there's less that you got to maintain. It's less patches you got to worry about. It's less security vulnerabilities that you have to worry about.
You take the operating system out of the value chain. You take remove. This is why the immutable operating system is so. Where if everything on the bare metal is interacting with a container first, right? Board directly into container through the kernel, then maintaining the operating system becomes a lot less important, right? It becomes a lot less important.
Yeah, and we're even trying to explore what does it look like to just put a hypervisor on bare metal, even for edge devices. Put a hypervisor on bare metal, hoping that hypervisor is as minimum as possible just to get you up and going.
What's the biggest issue with running Ubuntu in a container? Honestly, it's the config. It's mapping the operating system to all of the physical devices, the ports and everything that you're going to be using. If I want to throw a thumb drive in, I've got to map that port through a configuration file into Ubuntu OS inside of the container. Hey, Vaughn, go down to Derek H49's comment from YouTube, the one right before Doug.
The other thing too is that containers are meant to come and go. If you're not
meant
careful,
to be ethereal if you want them to be.
Right. Yeah. And so be careful what you ask for. If you run a whole OS in a container, it may just disappear just as quickly. And you may not want that.
So Doug says, I'm an end user and we have MQTT Broker and Grafana deployed in a production Docker host. As we scale out, I see that growing significantly. All right, so let's talk real quickly. The reason I bring this up is this is a very good illustration. MQTT Broker and Grafana oftentimes get deployed together in a stack, okay? However, as you start to scale, you're scaling Grafana and not necessarily scaling the broker. So one of the important changes is I want more instances of Grafana, but I want all those instances of Grafana interacting with the same broker or the same cluster of brokers. Rather than when I first deploy, I'm deploying the one broker instance, one Grafana instance together. But as you build your Grafana dashboards out, you end up distributing those based on some type of semantic organization, region, plant, area, whatever. But they're almost certainly going to be interacting with the same broker. So when you say that you're going to scale that out and it's going to grow significantly, managing that using something like App Portal or Edge Agent, the Edge features in Portainer, becomes much more important as you start to hit. It's very easy to manage just one compose, right? I'm working at the consultant side. All POC and final solutions are based on containers, Ahmed. So, Ahmed, can you, if you're still watching, can you, you made this comment a while ago, but can you quickly just comment what types of projects you're working on? So are you doing MES? Are you doing ERP implementations? Are you doing business intelligence? What are the types of things that you're doing in proof of concept and in production environments?
Yeah, and the other challenge with bare metal walkers, isolation. So let's say you have two different kind of flavors of stacks, and let's say one stack is going to go haywire. If they're sharing the same resources as your other stack, it's going to take over. Maybe it'll use too much RAM or it'll use too much storage. So that's also been a challenge of how do you, within a Docker ecosystem, how do you constrain containers or stacks to resources in a very deterministic way? So that's another reason that we're investigating hypervisors and virtual machines, because it becomes way more intuitive about this stack is going to have only access to 2 of the cores of the 4. So I can allocate the other 2 to this other independent stack, even though they're running on the same hardware. So that's also a challenge as well.
Will you throw DM 5805's question up the Bootsy comment? You want to go ahead and take that, Matt?
Bootsy, very interesting development. I've not heard of it. Benefits of this open container initiative tools: use a compose file to build your server image, convert the image into bare metal OS. That sounds interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I learned something today. Bootsy. Yeah, I think that for me, for a headless, let's say a headless edge device, so you're not really having direct interaction from an operator on the bare metal device. To me, the best case scenario would be some immutable OS that you could set it and forget it. And maybe once a year, once every 3 years, you'd have to update it. But the idea is that you don't have to update it because of what it's doing or what it's in control of. It's not that like Windows. You think what Windows is and how many things it has going on. And that
Windows is dying. Microsoft.
Yeah.
Let's just put it this way. Important. The Windows 11
debacle
is an absolute fiasco. If it is an absolute fiasco. And by the way, when the Windows 11, the number of manufacturers who are talking to me about, Walker, what do you think about Pop OS?
Oh, yeah.
Seriously, for like workstations, and the number of manufacturers who are saying, for the first time, we are considering moving away from Windows.
Whenever you buy a computer from a store and you get it and it has all this stuff installed, you're like, why does it have all this bloatware installed on it? It's bad when you install vanilla Windows and you ask that, why does it have all this bloat on there?
Yeah. And the biggest mistake that Microsoft did was with Windows 11 so tightly coupling Copilot to it.
The AI.
It's just a huge mistake. The market isn't ready. The market isn't ready, and it just didn't take into account.
It's forcing you on that. It's the OneDrive integration bothering you about why are you not connected to our services? Is when you first boot up and then it forces you to create a Microsoft account. You're like, I'm not connecting this to the internet. Why are you forcing me through this?
Well, and think about how hard is it to use Docker on Windows?
Well, it used to be easy, and then Docker Desktop became licensed to where you can't use it for free anymore on Windows. So then it became more difficult. And then now you've got this weird bifurcation about Well, there's Windows containers and there's Linux containers,
Right.
and the ecosystem may or may not support both flavors of an application.
Well, I mean, look at it this way, because the kernel, and for those of you who are relatively new to Docker, the kernel is the differentiating factor. The operating system is just like a path to but the kernel itself, you implement a Docker implementation, and what you're really doing is sharing all the containers through one instance of a kernel. That's basically what you're doing. There's a one-to-one relationship between kernel and operating system, and so. But the interesting thing here is that in the containerized world, Linux is VHS, and Microsoft is Betamax.
Yeah.
The whole install base, everything is on the Linux side.
But it's bad when the going recommendation is, well, just install Linux within Windows, like WSL2, where you can run a Linux VM kind of within Windows ecosystem, so that you can then use that to then run Docker. It's like, why am I using Windows again?
With the app portal, let me ask you this: if we were to do a workshop centered around Portainer, a workshop would basically have to be, you'd have to start at the beginning, right? You couldn't just jump in and do app portal, because you'd have to do Edge agent, you'd have to do Portainer server, right? You'd have to do Portainer agent, you'd have to do Edge agent, you'd have to show the difference between sync and async. You'd have to get to all those points. Yeah. You'd have to teach that stuff, then move into the app portal, because people would have to understand the difference between why is it I need to move to the app, because the app portal is kind of overkill when you're first in development, right? When you're first getting in development and getting involved, it's kind of like HiveMQ, right? It's all, data ops. Why do I need a standalone data ops platform when I can build UDTs and inside of Ignition? And the answer is because you can't scale it that way. Right. That's the reason you need a standalone data ops platform, but it's a good way of learning it quickly. So let me ask you this. If we were to, I mean, obviously this type of scale is something that people keep asking for. If we were to do a workshop on Portainer, specifically the app portal, like Portainer launches it with a workshop, what would the lesson be? Like if GE Appliances is saying this is the lesson that should be taught so people understand the value, or you say it, Matt Parris says it, or you're coming from the GE perspective, so Appliances perspective, what should the lesson be? What would the workshop, what should a workshop entail?
You walked through a lot of it. So just like we started in the beginning of it, you got to start with, what is it like to deploy a container, and with a command line, and then you can use Portainer to see that the container exists and dive into the console of that container to see the logs coming out of it, see what volumes are in use, and kind of just monitor the container. Then I think the next step is a compose file. So what is it like to make use of a compose file so you can repeat that Docker run command multiple times? You can stop it, start it, stop it, start it. Delete volumes, so then you can start it from scratch, so it gets running as if you never installed it to begin with. That's a very useful development technique, as well as I need to clear it as if it's running for the first time. That's hard to do with installed applications, but with Docker, you can blow away the volumes and start your compose file back up, and you're back up and running fresh, like it never started. And then it's, how do I upgrade versions? How do I deploy to two things at once? How do I manage multiple variants within a fleet of devices? So you just kind of progress through until you end up with, oh, I can feel the pain already, and I only have a handful of things, and here's where it'd be very useful. I think it's, to kind of tie it to UNS a bit, I think we're experiencing the same pain with UNS of, if you're the only one that's working within some data, it's easy for you to start that and spin it up and work within that data. But when you start trying to integrate external third parties to that data without a standard or a definition of the data, then it becomes a lot harder to manage at scale. So for example, the people, when you're starting out with Portainer, you're not going to want to use the app portal because it requires a little bit of upfront work to define your application. So to start with, you may not even know what you need yet. You may be trying to work that out. And so you work that out through experimentation with your compose files and your config files and mapping out how many configurations do we want? What are the variants? Just by taking inventory of how this thing's going to deploy out. Once you know that, then you can orchestrate, oh, here's the flavors that we need to develop and define. Once you define them, then you can build out your app catalog. Then when you have your app catalog, then you can deploy very easily. For me, I wear two hats sometimes. One hat is development and the other hat is operations. And a lot of times I'll do some development work and forget. And then when I go to operations and just want to deploy something quickly, I got to go back in my notes and pull out what was this command and what did this little tweak mean. So it's even for me as a user of trying to deploy out to multiple things, it's helpful to basically document your work in a repeat thing that you can deploy repeatedly.
All right. Any other things you want to cover or you think we should cover?
I was going to show deployment through the app portal. I think that'll be useful just to see how it's interacting. That won't take but long. So if you could flip the screen back up.
Let's do this, Vonnie.
So you can see here I've got two apps installed on my infrastructure already. I got Nginx and Node-RED. So you can see they're running on this node. But you'll remember that I've got that new device that I onboarded. I got device groups. These are my unassigned devices. So I'm going to bring this guy assign it into the plant floor group. And that group is located within this part of the hierarchy, just for demo purposes. And so if I come to my app catalog, if I got Node-RED, you can see the different versions that it supports and the different kind of information of it. So I can install the application. All right, which variant am I doing? Let's say I'm going to do production, and I'm going to do version 3. So next. Well, where do you want to deploy it? So let's say I'm going to do that. So now this kind of the choosing the configuration, what flavor do you want? It's telling me that it's expecting some certificates on the device at the specific locations, which is helpful because that's not always clear too of what the requirements are of the application of what files does it need. So you click next. It's kind of giving me some default values of variables here. So it's got the MQTT port, the server, and the username. So I can fill in the password with password, let's say. So click next. Now it's kind of like one final step. Let's say that I did want to, let's say I had 50 devices I'm deploying to, but device 1, that password, I really want it to be password 123. So I can create an override of that. So now I can see where I'm installing it to, and then click install. And so off it's running. So we can watch, you can see it's creating each edge stacks in the background automatically. It's also creating the edge groups and it's linking those things together. And then you can see over here that it's working in install version 3.1.15.
Well, how does this get played for you? So again, you're here as Matt Parris, but everybody knows you're with GE Appliances. So, and obviously I would think the market would care, hey, what is GE doing with digital strategy? What is GE Appliances doing with digital strategy? How does this, I could see a lot of scenarios here where if GE if appliances or Hire decided, we want to collect data off of washing machines that we manufacture, or we want to more seamlessly manage the software we have running on our appliances. This is an architecture that would work for that. But obviously you're in a different space, right? You're on the OT side, you're on the
manufacturing,
on the manufacturing side, right? Where does this play for you?
So for us, it still stays within the manufacturing site. So as we deploy multiple PCs for, let's say, our cybersecurity initiative,
okay,
we're trying to get devices that are taking inventory of our factories, of all of our equipment, and we got to install a PC for every isolated network that's out there to then go do scans and see what devices are here, what firmware versions are they at, do I have any cybersecurity risks to those devices and firmware versions? So as you deploy those, that detection application will be a Docker container, and it'll be able to deploy it across a fleet of devices and be able to manage the upgrades of those.
Let me ask you this: what step? Obviously, not everyone's using Docker containers in that use case, although they should be. What intellectual step do you think organizations have to take in order to draw that conclusion? Do they have to bring in somebody externally who's just been playing with Docker or Cube for the last 6 years? Or, I mean, what is the difference between an organization that is concluding to do it the way you're proposing it versus the old way, which is managing bare metal and applications separately? What is the intellectual step they have to take? What is the thing? What is the problem they have to think they have in order for them to look at containers as the solution to that problem?
I think for, let's say, the end users that you kind of typically deal with, they're not going to care. I think it's really going to be for either the system integrator that's there to maintain the systems.
Okay. There you
where
go.
you have the pain of what is it like to install software from scratch on bare metal, and how quick is it to deploy a Docker container,
and how much of a pain in the ass is it to maintain it?
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things, you see it to believe it. Like Sparkplug, when you have all these devices calling in home, and you see all these things pop up about all these devices just appear. Until you see that, you don't really appreciate the level of scalability of, oh, this was really easy to do.
Here's the example I like to use. Prior to the Ignition 8.3, okay, 8.3 kind of changes the way that you would manage infrastructure at scale with Ignition specifically. But prior to 8.3, what I was doing with one of the most annoying things is I have a starter environment I install at every client, at every customer. And so that's got a gateway backup. It's got modules. It has database. It has a database instance. It has a time-based instance. Like, it's 7 or 8 applications, and they're all configured to talk to one another. And deploying them was really like a command line script, or, I'd have to write this big, massive bash script that I would deploy to try and get it so that once I hit the button, I could go to the Ignition gateway and my username and password's already configured. My database is already connected. My project is already there. I'm not having to restore any of that. And so I was using Docker and Portainer specifically. I basically would create a stack, and then I would go in and manage it, and then I would create a new image from what I created, right? So I would configure it, and then I would create a new image from it, and that would become the image that I would deploy in the stack, right? And that the amount of time that saves me, in a manufacturing environment I got to deploy to 30 plants. That goes from 160 hours of engineering doing the restoration at 30 plants to 1 hour. And it doesn't even take 1 hour. It takes 15 minutes. But it's 1 hour work. It's a 160 hour down to a 1 hour stroke of the key, which I'm using Portainer and Docker for. There's one of the things that I'm really thinking about is one of the intellectual steps that I think people struggle with is, this looks cool. Where do I use it, and how do I use it?
I would say that you want to use it as when you're talking about your infrastructure. I think that's really where you're wanting to use it. So like end user PCs are probably not within scope of this. But when you have those PCs that are in the middle between 2 end users or between 2 applications, and they're kind of either jumping points or they're part of your infrastructure or edge devices, they're headless and they're kind of forgotten about. When you go from bare metal up to something, there's a lot of steps that it takes to get to that. And so Docker, in a way, it forces you to document kind of what are those steps to get to what you had, so you can get there again. Or let's say you got to restore the PC from scratch, or let's say you got to deploy that PC again, but in a different location. When you create your application definition and your compose files and all that, it's basically becoming a self-documenting it's a way of documenting or forcing you to document the steps you took to make it happen, so that you don't have to go remember or have tribal knowledge of, oh yeah, I forgot that one command that you got to send to configure that one file on the OS so that it would work. So if you're ever trying to do things repeatably, either because you have lots of PCs and you're trying to repeat this over and over and over, to create cookie cutter deployment strategies, that's where it's best. And so infrastructure is really where it leverages itself, either when you have a lot of servers that are running the same type of applications, like you have let's say you have 50 plants and each plant always runs a broker, always runs an ignition node, and always runs this other thing. If you're trying to stamp those out like cookies, you want to have that well-defined about what that is to make your life easier.
All right, last question I have for you before we don't have anything else to cover, right? I mean, that install was the last part, or the deployment.
Yep.
Let me ask you this. What doesn't the tech contain? So if we look at not just Portainer and the app portal, like obviously what happened here is you had a very specific problem that you worked with Portainer on that ended up turning into a whole new product, right? A whole new product that bolts onto their existing product. What's next? What is another gap in this type of deployment and management strategy that has to be closed, in your opinion?
I don't know yet, because until I start using it, I won't see the next gap. It's one of those things where once you start using it, then you start to see where the friction is. And then you realize what you got to go work on next. I'm suspecting it's going to be around either alarming or monitoring, or kind of this general term of observability. Mm-hmm. And you can see that Portainer starting to
insight into performance for me.
Yeah, like when is my CPU pegging at 100% when it's been at 5% for the past 2 years?
When do you find out that the container you deployed has a internal log that isn't being truncated, and it fills up and takes your container down? You know what I mean? Like,
or that the container's not even running.
Yeah. Or not even running. Correct. Yeah. Or it's not running, or it's not healthy, or so much. Those are such huge gaps. That has to be edge driven. It needs to be event based, being pushed to you. And I know Portainer's doing a bunch of stuff with that, but right now, not enough people have that problem. Only the most mature implementations have that problem. And, so therefore it's low priority. Real quick before we call it, what are you looking forward to the most at Prove It?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm looking forward to, I'll be going there with a team from GE Appliances. And so they will be getting to meet a lot of the crew for the first time. So I'm looking forward to hearing their opinions of what all the vendors are having to offer. I think, as always, it's a good opportunity to get to meet face-to-face a lot of people from the community. So there's still people I have not met personally from the last Prove It. So I'm looking forward to that. I don't know what to expect. This is only the second time that you've had the conference. So it's hard to know what to expect. I feel like there will be some surprises.
I'll say this.
It'll be interesting to see what everybody comes with.
Use cases are much more complex.
Yep.
This year. And there are a lot more supply chain use cases.
So we've been working on the i3X initiative, which you're aware of. To me, it's got some traction. And so I'm excited to see how HiveMQ and Ignition will be there to demonstrate some of that capability. There's been a lot of vendors that expressed interest with it. And you have Process OPC coming from Finland. So they're one of the top vendors in the whole world about OPC. And so they're interested in, this is what UNS looks like from an OPC's perspective. And I think it'll be very interesting to see how they solve that problem, because I think that a lot of it can be solved, especially when you're talking about the information definition. I'm curious how they're going to solve some of the things on our periphery, such as self-reporting or self-registration of edge devices. So it'll be exciting to meet those guys for the first time. We've been conversing for the past 4 years online. So the fact that they're willing to come across the ocean to the conference is saying quite a bit. So yeah, excited to see i3X, because sitting on the Fireside chat last year, that was one of my big hopes and challenges to the community, was that at the next Prove It conference, we'd see this API actually deployed in real products. And
everybody's producing and consuming a profile at Prove It this year. And about 2/3 of the vendors who were there last year are there this year. Actually, I think it's a little more than that. Where we're at right now, I think we're about 70% end users will be there. It's going to be a jam-packed week. I mean, we're covering a lot of stuff. We have a very exciting announcement. Like there's a, I don't want to give it away. They're going to kill me if I mean, I know Vaughn right now is probably fucking texting me, don't you dare say it. But we're doing a really awesome thing. We're giving a lifetime achievement award out, basically. Let's just say that. We're giving out and it's called the Lifetime Proved It Award. And the person who's getting the award it's well deserved. And I'm super excited about it. But
awesome.
Yeah, Vaughn's over here. He's literally just said fucking mum's the word. He's like, and I'm sure that if the team is watching right now, they're texting me, shut up, Walker, because they told me about 5 times after we decided to do it, don't say a damn word. But I mean, it's going to be a crazy week. I mean, and I can tell you, I've looked at the vendors have really stepped up their game, and the life sciences Prove It sessions are going to be pretty sick. What's very interesting, we have a glass manufacturer and then a multi-site bottler manufacturer, and then we have life sciences. The number of people who are choosing to use both the glass manufacturer and the bottler together in the same supply chain use case is pretty remarkable, the number of them. And also, I'll be doing a Prove It session. So I'm actually opening the show doing my own Prove It session using many different products that are going to be there.
So yeah, just I was very happy with working with Portainer through this process. I thought they did a killer job of being able to capture the user experience and turn it into a product. And again, like I said, the vendors that take IT that's hard to wrangle sometimes and it's complicated, if you can hide that under the hood and turn it into intuitive OT workflows, you'll take over.
All right, so awesome.
They're definitely a company that's doing that.
How are you handling edge processing after getting data from the MQTT brokers? So this is a generic MQTT. I'll let you answer it since you're doing it, and then I'll answer how I do it. Actually, what's really funny? I had this conversation with one of the engineers at Intellic today. He called me and asked me a specific question around. It was more around Canary Labs historian, and hey, I want to do aggregation, but the aggregation is ad hoc. So if I'm building dashboards and I want to be able to analyze historical data in reference to real-time data, which is obviously coming from the broker, is it best for me to do calculations and aggregations in Canary, or do I just pull all the raw time series and do the aggregations and calculations in Ignition? Right. We were just having this conversation. Where should the processing happen? I'll let you go first.
Yeah, and this goes back to what is an MQTT broker, and I think it's started by an innovation and a critical part of the infrastructure, and it's turning into a commodity. And so you can see all the companies that are brokers that are trying to build capability around the brokers. So do you have capability in terms of when I receive data, I can validate that it matches a data model or not? And if it doesn't match a data model, I'm going to reject the data because I don't want them infecting the unified namespace. Or do you have a processing platform like Node-RED kind of surrounding your real-time broker telemetry? and they're just pulling data in and publishing out via MQTT, or are they publishing out via SQL or some other historian to save their aggregation data? Do you have something more formal like HiveByte or Ignition or HiveMQ, Pulse? There's lots of these softwares, and it's
Pulse is where I think a lot of people are going to use HiveMQ Edge with Pulse to do this edge processing. Right now, I'm doing so much of it using Ignition Edge, or I'm processing on the edge. First off, any data processing that is required for the information model that I'm publishing into the UNS, I am doing on the edge. I am not doing it once it gets to the UNS. Right. I'm publishing raw with the information model pre-processed.
But I think that's part of the journey that this community is on, is that you start by saying, okay, everything's going to send their data in.
Right.
But under what modeling or how's their data structured or whatever, and you're given access to these sensors that have defined their data in a certain way, and it may not be good or not. So you start to want to protect, well, what is the core information that I need applications to depend upon? So it's almost this idea of I'm going to have everything published into a sandbox first that is unrelated to the UNS. I'm going to then massage the data to be in the format that I need, and then inject that massaged model with the data into the UNS. So then I can now manage it at scale. I mean, there's so many vendors that have MQTT data, so many vendors that have OPC data that are all modeled in however they want. There's no standardization there at a object-oriented perspective. So there's always this layer of integration where you have to consume the data, map it either to existing information models, or massage it to create your own, so that then other applications can make use to it.
And that process never ends. It is a continuous process of learning and updating and iterating and iterating and iterating. All right, awesome. So with that, we're gonna those of you who, again, quick reminder, because they sent me a message, hey, please remind folks who want to stay at the hotel for Prove It that a couple of the nights the rooms are getting very low. So if you're planning on coming to Prove It, you plan on staying at Hyatt Regency Reunion Tower, please book your rooms. With that, thank you to Matt Parris from GE Appliances for going over the new Portainer app portal. I think we're going to do a workshop on this. I think we need to. So I'm going to talk to Matt about it. We'll talk a little bit more to the community about it. But I think this is something that needs to be taught. Okay. So guys, be on the lookout for that. With that, like, subscribe. Matt, thank you, buddy. And comment down below. We'll see you in the next one.